So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on in my world. To tell you the truth, since we have redone the campground code, my calls have went down to about like this. So I take that as that was a success. We did a great job with that rule, and a lot of that was your folks' participation in helping us write that rule. We have a lot of other rules that also affect the campground industry. And so I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of highlight about what's going on with some of those other rules that we're working on that may also impact you as well. So ATCP 75, that's the food code. That's those of you that have retail food establishment operations or restaurant operations need to follow the requirements in ATCP 75. We've been challenged with that rule. We started that rule over 2 years ago, and it's been hung up in the legislature. This is our third shot at getting it through the legislature, and we think the third time's a charm. So we're hoping that hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months that we will have a new Wisconsin food code based on the 2013 model FDA code. And you're saying 2013, it's already 2019. Well, 2020, right. But the code comes out every other year. So there'll be another code coming out in 2021. And so as soon as this rule gets passed, we'll be turning around and opening up that rule again and updating it to the future 2021 code. But I wanted to share with you some of the changes that we are going to see in the food code. Some of this may apply to your operations, some of it may not apply to your operations, but there's a new word out there called a micro market. And a micro market is kind of a cross between a retail store that doesn't have any employees and a vending machine. So you basically go and you grab the food that you want, and then you go to a kiosk and you pay for that food. That's what a micro market is. And so there are new regulations currently even in statute now that deal with this new type of an operation that's called a micro market. Licensing and pre-inspection fees, change of operator, those are going to be changing within the retail food industry. The way the Department of Agriculture works is that all licenses, all new change of operators, all new businesses are required to have a pre-licensing inspection and an inspection. And you pay a pre-licensing fee and you pay a retail food establishment fee that one time when you first open up. And then every time after that, you pay a renewal fee for your license. And what is going to change is some of the ways in which licenses can be transferred, not transferred, ownership issues, and I'll get a little bit more into that as we get into the slide so that you have a better understanding of what those changes are that only apply to the retail food establishment. The way things are now with all the other programs, all the recreational programs, nothing is changing there. But in the retail food side of it, DADCAP had their own rules. When we came over from DHS, we had our own rules, and those had to be merged together, and we had to come up with a new way of looking at it. So we'll talk about that. We've also now included standards into the administrative rule. So the ATCP 75 has two parts. One is the administrative rule that talks about licensing and all those requirements, and then you have the appendix, which is the food code. And so what we've done is we've incorporated inspection standards now into the administrative rule, which is really for our staff and our agent inspectors, what the department is setting a standard for what we expect during inspections. And then also, we're going to be dealing with wholesaling for a retail food establishment. So some of you probably say, well, what does that have to do with me? Well, a retail food establishment in the past was allowed to wholesale up to 25% of their retail sales without the need for a wholesale license. But that wasn't extended to restaurants because restaurants had their own other code. Well, when we merged together with the Department of Agriculture, of course, the restaurant industry said, well, why don't we get to have that same benefit that the retail food establishments have, where we are allowed to wholesale up to 25% of our food product to other industries or to other campgrounds or to other entities without having a wholesale license. So that was incorporated into the rule, which basically would allow you, if you had some type of a special product that you made that other campgrounds were asking for, that other industries were asking for, you wanted to market something that you are producing at your retail food establishment, you could wholesale up to 25% of that without the need for an additional food processing or wholesaling license. We spelled out the variance process and the requirements for HACCP plans. HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. Those are special plans that have to be drawn up if you do a special process. So if you're doing your own smoking and curing operation in your food establishment, there are specific requirements that you have to meet for that, and you may need to apply for a variance. You may need to apply for a HACCP plan, or you may have to do both. And so what we did to make that process easier is actually spell it out step by step in the rule what you need to do if you meet one of those requirements and you have to apply. It basically walks you through everything that you need in that application to submit to the department for approval. So most of you know that I'm a big believer in having clear language. Just tell me what I have to do and I'll do it, but I just need to know what I need to do. And so when we did the updates in this rule, we wanted to make it very clear. Everything's here for you. I don't expect that you have to search 20 other different codes to find out what you need to know to make an application to the department. We put everything in there for you, so all you got to do is follow along, and it walks you through exactly what you need to do to apply for that variance, or if you have to put together a HACCP plan for your special process, it walks you right through it. Mobile food carts now include intrastate railway. We have found that we have a few trains in Wisconsin that only stay in Wisconsin that are serving meals and allowing lodging, overnight stays on trains. And so we had to deal with lodging licenses and food establishment licenses, just like any other business that serves food or provides lodging for guests. Certified food managers, most of you are all aware of the requirement for a certified food manager if you're serving meals. When the new code passes, all retail food establishments will require a certified food manager. So in the past, it was only if you did the restaurant, but you had a retail store, you didn't need one for the retail store, but now in the future, all retail food establishments will require a certified food manager. And that certified food manager is required within 90 days. So you get 90 days to get that certified food manager. It used to be 6 months, but we've had this food certification requirement in Wisconsin since 2009. So it's been a part of Wisconsin for a very long time. most people felt in industry as well that 6 months was way too long for people to get food safety training, and that certified food manager requirement with the abundance of courses that are now available, that 3 months was not a problem for people to be able to get certified food manager certification. So that's changing as well. There are still some exemptions. If you have a retail food store and everything is prepackaged or it's not potentially hazardous, you're not really doing anything. You know, there is no food handling. So there are still some exemptions in there. And food employee restriction. There are requirements in the code now that if you have an employee that is experiencing symptoms, fever with a sore throat, vomiting, diarrhea, jaundice, where they have not been diagnosed, that they're supposed to be excluded from your facility for 48 hours. That's changing back to, the feds have changed that down to 24 hours. So now you only have to exclude an employee for 24 hours as long as symptoms have subsided. If they have fever with a sore throat, diarrhea, vomiting, or jaundice. Now if they have diagnosis, of course, then you're going to follow whatever those requirements are with that healthcare provider for the diagnosis of that particular foodborne illness. There's going to be a new requirement in 75 as well for cleanup of vomiting and diarrheal events, and that will be spelled out in the code as well. There's a huge concern with norovirus, and it's probably one of the most common foodborne illnesses now that we come up against. It's usually a short duration, usually 72 hours, but it can affect a lot of people, and it can happen when there's a vomiting or diarrheal event. And so FDA has put together specific requirements for cleanup of those events. Not only that, so that you're protecting your customers, but you're protecting your employees as well. This probably doesn't apply to most of you, but there is a new USDA requirement that has been basically handed down to the states that will require, if you are grinding your own meat, that you have to keep grinding logs for that. Refilling returnables, there's a whole another section in the code now that's going to deal with when is acceptable to allow a customer to bring in a returnable. If you do accept returnables that you're going to refill with food, what are the steps? How do you treat those returnables if they come into your food establishment? So there's a big push with cutting down the use of plastics and letting people bring in their own containers, and so some of that is going to be start to be allowed, but depending upon the type of food item that goes in there, there may be additional treatment that a food establishment may have to do if they're going to put food into that container. Some establishments don't want to take that responsibility. I'll give you the container that you're going to use, but I don't want a container that you're bringing from your home because I have no control over how that container was treated. But you have a growing economy out there that is really pushing the reuse of materials. So that's been addressed in the code, but there's some specific requirements that go along with it depending upon what you want to do. Thawing fish. So I know a few of the campgrounds do Friday fish fries at their campgrounds. If you get fish that is in hermetically sealed or ROP packaging, of course the correct way is you're pulling that product out and you're thawing it in your walk-in cooler a few days ahead of time. When you're dealing with a reduced oxygen packed, cryovac package, If you're going to thaw that in your walk-in cooler, you should be taking a knife or a scissors and cutting a hole or a slash in that package to allow air to get in. Because what's happening is it's now sitting in an anaerobic environment, and once you get temperatures in that thawing process, you can allow critters like Clostridium botulinum to grow. So by introducing air into that package, by putting a slash mark into that package while it's thawing, you're allowing oxygen to get in there, which CBOT doesn't really like oxygen. So it's a matter of just allowing oxygen to get into that package during the thawing process. And then dogs in outside seating areas. That's been a huge issue, not only in Wisconsin, but around the country, where people wanting to actually bring their animals into a food establishment. Not too many places that I know are allowing that, unless it's a service animal. But we try to accommodate our restaurants the best way that we could by at least allowing dogs in an outside seating area. Right now the code prohibits animals on your premise. So that includes any of the area that you own, the restaurant itself and the area around the restaurant that you own. Animals are prohibited. But we're going to put a provision in our code that allows people to have an outside seating area, and they can allow dogs in that outside seating area, and we put the provisions that they have to follow if they want to do that.
What if they have to go through the building to get to the outside seating area?
No, they can't do that.
Okay.
The animal is not allowed in the food establishment, so you'd have to have a separate entrance if you wanted to be able to do something like that.
Two questions.
Yeah.
Can I just back up a bit? So the CBOT and the fish, would that scissor idea also apply to other meats other than fish?
It's particularly worrisome with fish. There's a special type of botulinum, type E, that you normally associate with fish, and that's why they want that package cut open.
Fish only, okay.
Yep.
And then refilling returnables. So a lot of us have slushy machines
Mm-hmm.
in the campground, and you'll see a vendor here that sells this whirly cup. It's so tall.
Mm-hmm.
We all sell it $5.
Yep.
First, slushy's free, but then you bring it back in to get refilled.
Yep.
So
And that's
could we rinse it out?
yeah, those aren't really an issue because you're refilling those through a contamination-free process. That's no different when you take your coffee cup into the Quick Trip and you just turn your handle and you fill up your cup. That's through a contamination-free process. But if somebody's bringing in a container to you that you're going to take back and put hot soup into, that's a different scenario. So the difference between beverages and food are two different issues. But there's nothing that stops you from allowing that now, as long as it's through a contamination-free process where I can fill that beverage container without sticking the nozzle up into that cup, as long as it's being filled where there's no possibility of contamination. No different than when you're at a fast food facility and you can go and refill your Coca-Cola or whatever as well. That's already allowed. This is just more specifically for really food items that when people bring those in.
I have a question
Yeah.
about the dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Ours is kind of an interesting situation where our building has the bar and restaurant in the front, and then you have to go around, if they're staying in the cabins, you have to go around the front of the building to the side to get to the access for their showers and toilets and stuff.
Okay.
So in that situation, how do you, if dogs aren't supposed to be on the premise, but yet there's accessibility for the cabins, for the showers
Yep.
and everything, how does that work?
I mean, we're not, out there saying, well, wait a second, a campground is different than a sit-down dine-in restaurant. So we're looking at the premise in a campground as the premise is your seating area and your service area because you may have a restaurant that's it's part of your whole campground, right? So technically you could say that the whole campground is my premise, but we're not looking at it. We're not looking at it that way.
Okay.
You know, when you're dealing with a situation like that, we're just dealing with where's the footprint of your restaurant. That's what we're going to be concerned about.
I mean, we don't allow dogs in the restaurant area, so to speak, obviously. But.
Yep. And that brings up another point that many of you may be struggling with people bringing animals into your facilities, saying that, well, this is my comfort animal, or this is my support animal. And what can you say, and what kind of questions can you ask? There's two things you can basically ask. You know, you can't ask anything about their illness, but you can ask what task the animal provides for you.
Do they have to mark that animal in any way?
No.
No.
They don't have to. They don't.
I also found out you can't ask them for their identification
Right.
for the
You
animal
can't ask for
either.
credentials either.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So when they
So
say
anybody
task
can
is
just
just
come in and
makes
say
you feel
that.
good, do anything?
It only applies to a service animal. The law does not apply to comfort animals. And it only applies to dogs and miniature horses. So we don't have service cats. Yeah, miniature horses. Yeah. Reed is over there laughing because I always tell him that I have this reoccurring dream that I'm in a restaurant and I turn and there's a service miniature horse looking right at me. But
So if they say it's for emotional support, we have the right to decline that animal to be in there.
right. I mean, you want to be careful because what you want to do is ask what task that animal provides for you. Some emotional support animals may be service animals. If you have somebody that's suffering from PTSD or something like that, that may actually be a legitimate concern. So you want to be careful, but you want to find out what task that animal is actually performing for that person. And, you know, no gooses, no monkeys, dogs. That's what we're talking about, dogs or the miniature horses. But
Any breed of dog.
right.
Well, I had somebody come in and they had this as a service animal, and that had to be in the swimming lake with them. Not just on the beach, but in the lake with them, sitting by them. And I'm like, oh boy.
I didn't think that was allowed.
Well, if it's a natural body of water, I mean, we don't regulate that, but we can certainly say they can't go in the swimming pool. Just like we can say they can't go in the kitchen. And we can, and if that dog is not under the control of that operator and it's out of control, you can ask them to leave.
Well, what do you do if the thing defecates right there in the water? Which
Right.
is very possible.
Right. I mean, it's no different than any other wildlife that's in that natural body of water that's defecating. I can't help you out with the natural body of water. I can help you out if you got a licensed swimming pool.
Thank God it wasn't a pony.
Posting, yeah, every campground should have, and don't get it, ask Lori for it. Posting and what you can put on your bulletin boards and on your doors, on exactly how to address service animals and comfort animals. It's on the website. Just download from the website.
Yep.
You'll have everything you need, especially the new owners. Just make sure you get the information.
What's
And
the
it-
second question though again?
And if you, well, I can't remember now. It was,
We'll provide for you was one of them.
right.
What is the animal trained to do? That's
Right.
the same.
That's the same thing. It's basically you're safe to find out and ask what is the task the animal is providing for you. And if you have questions about that or you're not sure, you can always contact ADA. They're the ones that can give you answers on that, the American Disabilities Act, or talk to your legal counsel, because your legal counsel is the one that's going to be supporting you if it becomes a legal issue. But it's we walk a very thin line with where we can, what questions we can ask, so, you know, just be cautious when you move forward that you're not probing and asking too many questions, but you do have the right to ask what task the animal provides. And emotional support is not a service animal. So.
You said definitely not in the pool. You can tell them they can't take the dog. How about the pool area, the enclosed fenced-in deck?
Yes.
Yes, meaning what?
Yes, they can be allowed in there.
They can be allowed.
Yep, if it's a service animal.
Correct.
Right. And we also have allowed dog events. Usually it happens like the last day of the season, and they'll have a dog swim where they invite people in, and the dogs can go in the water. No, humans can't go in the water, but the dog, they might have the last day of the season, they'll have an event where they have a dog swim. And they allow people to bring the dogs in, and then when it's done, the pool is basically closed for the season. Owners don't like it, operators don't like it, because it's a nightmare to clean all that up, all the hair and everything that gets trapped in the filters. I don't know anybody that runs a pool that actually wants to do this. It's usually somebody above them that thinks it's a really good idea, but they're not the ones that have to clean it up afterwards. And so we have allowed those with a variance from the department to make sure that we have protocols that are being followed following that event. But hopefully nobody here is entertaining that as an option. Any other questions on anything that we talked about in the...
So you said they didn't have to provide any sort of certification or anything that shows that they're a service dog, so how are you supposed to know that it's a service dog to a company?
Good question. The only thing that you can ask them is, what task does the animal do for you? If they can't provide you with a task that the animal performs for them, then it's not a service animal because the animal's not providing a service.
So the first question is that a service?
Right.
Is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? Is that what it is?
And then what it's trained to do, that's how.
What task does it provide?
There are
for you?
other things too, like if you ask to pet the dog, you should not be allowed to
No.
pet it. So there are other things you can kind of skirt around.
Yep.
The dog should not be going up to other people. It should sit right
Yep.
by the owner, you know, so there are other things.
Yeah, it's just, it's one of these laws where the pendulum is all the way over here, and it's almost gotten out of control that we can't do anything because it's all the way over here. And eventually it will come back here, but it really does a disservice to the people that actually need to have the service animal.
For the dog, you can't give it to in the restaurant.
Yes, you can give them water in like a disposable bowl. That's about the only thing. They can't jump up on a chair and eat at the table with their human. But
if they do go on a seat, they gotta have a pad or something to sit them on, is what I heard too.
I don't know that they're allowed to sit at the table at all.
So here's some food for thought for everyone. I hear a lot of you saying, you ask them, is that a service dog? I don't ask them. I say right off flat, I'm sorry, we don't allow animals in here. Because when you ask them if it's a service dog or an emotional support dog, you're putting that thought into their mind. If you flat out tell them animals are not allowed in this building, if it is a true service dog, they will speak
They'll
up.
tell them.
Yeah. I would not ask them
But
right out.
they get angry about it.
They sure do.
I've never had anyone
Not
get
if it's a
angry.
I
true
have.
service animal, they won't get.
Yeah, I've never had
I've
anyone
run
get
into that same thing.
Especially if you have it posted outside your establishment. You do
If
not
it's a
allow
true
animals.
service dog, they should be able to prove it. And they should be
The
able
lady
to
with the
allow
dog sitting by her.
anyone can just say it's a service dog.
A lot of
Can't prove
service
it.
dogs too have the collar that's.
Right.
That the law says that they don't have to prove it. So
They don't even have to have anything identifying the dog as a service dog.
Nope.
They don't need a special vest, they don't need a special leash, they don't need to have any paperwork.
No, it's
Yep.
just he said, she said, it's a service
Yeah.
dog and
that's kind of where it's at. That's kind of where it's at right now.
we think that'll ever get changed?
I hope so.
You know, at 18, guy goes in, I want beer, I'm 21. Prove it. That's kind of where
I think that, you're going to, at some point in time, industry is going to start expressing concerns to ADA, and something more reasonable will be in effect. But right now, all of the benefit goes to the person that claims that they have the disability. So you have to be sensitive to that fact that they have rights, and that your questioning can only pertain to what task does the animal provide to them. If you have any other questions beyond that, you really need to talk to ADA or you need to talk to your attorney, but you want to be very careful about denying somebody access without setting yourself up for legal issues.
Well, I know where she's coming from because I've run it. I've had dogs in our establishment and I've done her approach, and I've had one lady that said, here's his identification. I didn't ask for it, I went by her,
Yep.
and she had it right behind her license,
Yep.
her identification. And the other gentleman said, he is my service dog. He was laying right under the table, didn't
Yep.
move, didn't, he said, I'm sorry, but I don't have his identification with
But
me.
you never asked for it.
No.
They offered to show it to you.
Yeah.
So that's different.
So,
Right.
I'm coming from her approach. The only one that we got smoked on was the sister of one of our seasonals. She had a Papillon or some fluffy looking dog in her purse thing, and that was her emotional support animal. Well, it turns out, no, it wasn't. But again, there wasn't anything we can do
Right.
because of all of this
Yep.
ADA type of stuff.
If they cannot describe to you the task that the animal performs for them, it's not a service animal.
How about rental units and service animals? And I believe you have to, you know, like we all have rental cabins, trailers, whatever. You have to let them stay.
If they have a service animal, yeah.
Yup,
Yeah.
in that, you know, and can you charge them an extra cleaning fee?
I don't know. I don't know if,
No, it's part of the ADA and their rights.
So the two questions are you disabled?
no, no, no. No. That would not be the first thing I would lead off with.
Well, that
What you can ask is the animal that they have a service animal? And if it is, you can ask, what task does that animal provide? That's it. That's all you can ask. Any other questions related to retail food establishments? All right. So moving on, we're going actually into the food code now. There is a certified food manager requirement for schools. And so the department actually has a contract with the Department of Public Instructions to do inspections of schools. Otherwise, schools are exempt from food inspections by statute. But USDA requires that schools that are participating in the school breakfast and lunch program have to have 2 inspections a year. So DPI contracts with the department and we perform that service for the schools. And schools are also required by statute to have at least 1 person in the district for that school has to be a certified food manager in the district, yep. Sanitizers are no longer needing department approval. For many years, the state of Wisconsin did its own efficacy testing on sanitizers to make sure that the claims that the manufacturer were making actually tested to be true with respect to parts per million for sanitization. And back then, EPA really wasn't doing such a good job, so Wisconsin kind of took that on themselves, and we had many states that would call Wisconsin for our lists. Over the years, EPA has done a better job, and so it's gotten to the point now that why are we continuing to do that? It really has no benefit EPA is doing that testing now. And so we no longer need department approval for a sanitizer in Wisconsin. All we want to do is make sure that it's EPA listed and registered for any sanitizer that you're using for your food contact surfaces. Allergens is really becoming a hot topic over the last couple of years. There's some language now in the rules that say, hey, food contact surfaces have to be cleaned to remove allergens. And so that means watching that we're not cross-contaminating items where there could be one of the big 8 allergens in there. And there's going to be probably in the next food code a lot more issues with respect to allergens. There is some legislation moving through Wisconsin right now requiring an allergen poster that would have to be in the back for employees, and also a statement in the menu, kind of like a consumer advisory, basically alerting the customer that if they have an issue or they have a problem with allergens, that they need to let their server know if they have questions. So it kind of puts a little bit of the onus on them as well, that if they have a concern with allergens, that they're bringing it to the attention of the food establishment. No more food prep in warewashing sinks. There was a provision in the code that allowed some food preparation in warewashing sinks. Wisconsin has a separate requirement that if you're going to do food preparation below the flood level rim of the sink, you need to have a separate sink just for food preparation. We went back and forth over the years with industry, and unanimously industry said it's gross. We don't want people doing food prep in the sinks that they're washing their utensils in. They want a separate food prep sink. So we kept that provision in there. As long as your food preparation is done above the flood level rim of the sink, so you've got a couple of tomatoes you want to wash, you got a cucumber you want to wash, and you put that in a colander and you run that under your, as long as it doesn't go into the sink basin, that's fine. But if you are going to thaw fish on Fridays, you really need to have a dedicated food preparation sink if you're going to put food below the flood level rim of the sink. So that's it. That's kind of the big issues for the food code. Like I said, we hope that in the next 2 to 3 months that code will actually be passed, and then we'll have 90 days before it actually goes into effect. And so I've already talked with Lori and a lot of our other industries. We'll probably be putting on some food code training around the state. And so once we get those locations set and we find out when those days are, we'll certainly let Waco know, so that if any of you are interested in coming to any of that training, you certainly are more than welcome to do that. We'll probably have 4 or 5 locations around the state that we'll do just for industry training on the new code changes.
Where can we, I'm new to all of this, where can we find the food code right now?
Right now, if you go to wisconsin.gov,
Okay.
and go to the Department of Agriculture's website, you should be able to find it in there. Just look for our section, the Food Safety and Recreational Licensing, or Recreational Businesses section.
What was that again?
Wisconsin.gov, and then go to the Department of Agriculture's website. And then you're just going to look for the food safety section.
I just got certified through the services.
And then you can also go to wisconsin.gov and actually go under the statutes and administrative rules and actually just look up the rule itself that way as well. and just look for ATCP 75, and then you can click on a PDF and you can download it to your computer if you want that way. If you're still having trouble, I can get it for you. Just all you got to do is send me an email, and I'll email you a copy of the code back to you as well. So what's going to happen this year? So this year we're opening up the swimming pool code, and that's ATCP 76. We've gotten our statement of scope approved, and so we will be setting up our industry groups. We've already reached out to Waco and asked for some volunteers to be a part of that code committee. All right. And so we'll start to work on that. And that'll be what we're kind of dealing with this year, as well as recreational educational camps, which really doesn't affect campgrounds. The recreational educational camps are like your summer camps, where you would actually send your kid to for a couple of weeks in the summer, and there's a lot more requirements there because you're actually giving up your parental rights to have somebody else take care of your kids for a couple of weeks. So we have all kinds of healthcare requirements and really focused around protecting kids. It's probably one of the most hazardous type of inspections that we do because it encompasses everything that we do. It includes camping, it includes swimming, it includes lodging, it includes swimming. Everything that we regulate is all in one spot in a rec ed camp. And so we'll be actually have that rule open at the same time and be dealing with both of those rules this year.
So does that just kind of apply to kids that are staying overnight?
Yes.
Okay.
Not day
So
camps.
Not for, okay.
Yep, day camps are actually regulated by the Department of Health Services. But we only get involved if it's an overnight of more than three nights. So what do we got going on next year, 2021, 2022? Depending upon how fast swimming pool codes and rec ed camps go, this might be more into 2022. But we have a few rules left that we need to update. And one will be the lodging code and the bed and breakfast code. So the lodging code hopefully will be able to update and address the issues that we're having with the tourist rooming houses. Those would be basically buildings that you are renting out that are more than 400 square feet that would need a tourist rooming house license. So that lodging code is the first public health code that was ever passed in Wisconsin, was for lodging. And it dealt with bed bugs. And oddly enough, we're still dealing with bed bugs again, aren't we? And we're back. It comes around. And so, not that the code hasn't been open since then, but it's been open a couple of times, but it's been probably 30 years since the lodging code has been opened up. And there's a lot of changes that need to occur to really modernize that code. So again, we'll probably be seeking for you to have a seat at the table as well when we get to that point. I don't know that any of you are doing bed and breakfasts on your campground. Okay, I haven't heard that model yet, but you know, the industry changes. You guys have shown me that the industry changes. So we have had some changes in staff. Most of you remember Samantha Fiscus. She was our swimming pool person. I think last year she was here and did some swimming pool training, but Samantha has moved on. She has become a small business owner herself, and she's running basically a doggy daycare. That's her business model, and so we all wish her a lot of success. And Mary Ellen stepped up to the plate and said, hey, I'll take on those swimming pools. And so Mary Ellen is going to be transitioning a little bit from campgrounds. Of course, she'll always be a resource for you. But she'll also be able to answer any of your swimming pool questions as well. And Ted, who a lot of you met last year, Ted will be, he's our lodging person, and he'll also be taking on some of those campground situations as well. So Ted will also be a resource for you as well. So now you've got a couple of resources that will be able to deal with you on campgrounds and swimming pools. And Reed's group, on the retail side, you've got 6 people that can answer questions on retail food establishments. So we are in the process of hiring another recreational person to help that capacity with losing Sam. And so you'll probably see another new face next year when we're at the convention. So this is what I wanted to talk to you. I just wanted to put a bug in your ear. The next time we probably open up the campground code, we will have a discussion about fees. We probably will have to talk about some type of a fee increase. I don't know what that will be. Not even thinking about that at this point. I don't know what it would be. I don't have any preconceived ideas, but it's 2008 was the last time we had a fee increase. And so at some point we need to have that conversation about where we're at, what are the resources that it takes us to do the job, and have that discussion with you. I believe in transparency. Everything will be out on the table. You guys can come in. We'll have a discussion about what the department needs to move forward. But that probably won't be for a few years yet. But I just wanted to put that out there so that nobody's caught by surprise when we mention that we have to have a talk about fees. I would like to model it more to the way that we're dealing with restaurants, where it's very simple, low, moderate, complex. You have an assessment. Your fee is based on what you do. And so if you don't do very much, you have a lower fee. If you do an awful lot, we're spending more time there, your fee should be higher. So I would like to, throw that kind of out there. You guys can kind of start thinking about it, but some type of a risk-based model approach to licensing. So I just throw that out there as a bug in your ear. And then start to think about changes in the camping industry. I'm sure that there's already changes that we didn't address in the last code revision that we did, but we did try to think ahead about what was going to happen in industry. But you guys are probably already starting to see some different things that are coming up. Keep track of these things so when we get to that point, we've got a list of issues that we can start to have discussions on. And then I talked a little bit before about the changes in licensing. And so right now in the code, with respect to campgrounds, you can't just transfer your license to a new operator. If a new operator takes over your campground, they're required to have their own license. Now the caveat to that is if you have a LLC where you have several owners and one of your owners becomes the new owner, that's not considered a change of license. Okay, so they would not need to have a new license for that. They would just need to get the license updated. But because that ownership transfer stays with somebody who was an owner in one of the businesses and now is an owner in the new business, that's not considered a change of license. What's new is if you completely sell your LLC to the new person and they buy the name of your business and your LLC, it's not a change. not a change in ownership. Again, the license would just need to be updated. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally somebody comes in and just buys everything, the LLC and everything. And the way business works is people move in and out of corporations all the time. The structure stays the same, it's just some of the players move around. And that's basically what we're saying is here is that yes, the whole LLC is getting bought out. The structure is staying there, just the people are changing. And that's not considered a change of operator if the entire LLC gets bought. So if you have questions, you can always call our licensing section with questions. We have mailboxes as well. I think Lori probably has copies of that. You can talk to Ted, you can talk to Mary Ellen, and we can answer those questions for you as well. But that's what I got. Here's my contact information if you ever want to shoot me an email or give me a call. I'm probably very hard to get a hold of by phone, and that probably respond much better with email. But I'm always available. If you have questions, if you have concerns, don't keep them to yourselves and stew about it. If you've got a problem with an inspector that came to your area and you don't agree with what that person had to say, feel free to reach out and talk to us. I might not give you the answer you want to hear, but at least we can have the conversation. And you know, sometimes people make mistakes or there's miscommunication. And so I can act as that mediary to make sure you're getting the right information, as well as Mary Ellen and as well as Ted. We're all here as a resource for you and a sounding board as well if you have questions.
Do you know why, and this is something we've dealt with, they transferred the state inspector's responsibilities to the local inspector?
So what happened?
That really screwed things up.
Yeah.
Because they have no clue what they're doing.
So what happens is, and that's sometimes what's going to happen when you have a new agent. But what happens in Wisconsin is you have state inspected areas, and you have local health departments that can become an agent of the department to do those inspections. And the state doesn't go out and mandate that counties have to do this or municipalities do this, but they have the option, if they want to explore becoming an agent for the department, as long as they meet the requirements that we put forth, they have the ability to become an agent for the department. In Wisconsin now, 75% of the work is done by local health departments, and only
responsible for training them, though.
Well, that's a combination of the department and a combination of their other partners out there. So we can't be there day in and day out,
right?
You know, but Reed's got, you know, a whole slew of technical staff that is continually going out and training individuals at local health departments. And it's just a part of what our role is transitioning to, is more of a training relationship to these local health departments, where we're doing less and less of the inspections and more of setting the standards and providing the training. And so it's something that, you know, we have a finite group of people, and industry is always changing. I mean, many of you know how hard it is to hang on to employees. They're constantly changing, and it just seems like you're training every day a new person. And so we experience the same thing in our industry as well. And many of you that have been around a while know that when you have a new person, it takes a little bit of time before that person starts to get comfortable with understanding everything that they have to do. We have a lot of rules, and I always encourage operators that if something doesn't sound right, question it. Ask them to show you where that is in the code. If they can't show you where it is a requirement in the rule, they shouldn't be writing it as a violation. And so, and I tell the inspectors that too. If you can't document and you can't show that person where that is in the rule, you shouldn't be writing it as a violation. And so I encourage you to ask those questions because you're seeking to understand what the requirement is as well. And you know, that's how we train our staff. We train our staff to document the observation. We document to put the code citation in there so that you can look it up yourself if you want to, and also a corrective action. Those three components have to be part of any citation that they see in the field. So we encourage you to ask questions if something doesn't sound right, and work through the issue with that inspector together. At the end of the day, if it still doesn't make sense or you're still confused or you don't think it's right, that's what we're here for. That's what the technical staff are here for, to ask those questions.
Excuse me, are they required to give you that report before they leave? Because I've gotten them later via email, well, they're
Yep.
going to ask the questions then. It's all
Yeah.
over.
They should be at least going over the inspection report with you. Many times now, they don't carry printers with them anymore because it's so easy to just, when they're back in the office, to email it off to you. But they should be reviewing the inspection report with you before they leave, and then just sending you that paper copy. Right, you have to sign it right on their tablet. So they should be reviewing the inspection report with you, but it's more efficient for us to just be able to email that copy to you at you know, and that's part of the standards that we talked about before, that if you don't leave the inspection report there immediately, it has to be in that operator's hands within 48 hours. So we're really trying to set the standards to improve the consistency throughout the state as well.
Jim, I wanted to go back to the service animal stuff.
Yeah.
You said you can ask the question, what task does it provide? Okay. Well, okay. Depending on what they say, okay. If they list what it does for them, if it's a task it provides, and it's a service animal. If they can't give you a task that it provides, then
you don't have to allow the animal in there.
Okay.
And you said emotional support isn't.
No, an emotional support animal is not, or a comfort animal is not considered a service animal. And that's right in the definitions of ADA. So if you go to the ADA site, and maybe Waco can do this. I think somebody said here before that Waco had something. But they have a really nice handout that would probably be beneficial for you guys just to have for your website. That you can share with other operators.
Jim, can you just verify your email for us? Is that correct?
james.kaplanik@wisconsin.gov.
Okay, so dhs.wisconsin.gov will read you also?
No, that won't anymore. It might work, but probably won't. This is the new one.
Regarding the pool code advisory committee, when are you anticipating those meetings to start?
Mary Ellen, when do you think we'll start meetings on the pool code? Yeah, it'll either have to be the spring or probably the fall, because we probably won't get much participation in the summer.